The man on the ridge heard his own daughter's voice calling his name from somewhere past the tree line, soft and scared, and the only problem was his daughter had been asleep in the tent behind him for the last 3 hours. He didn't move. He didn't answer. He just stood there in the dark, listening to something out in those Appalachian woods say the one word that could make any father run straight into danger. That sound, that voice that isn't a voice, is the reason people who grew up in these mountains still won't answer a call they hear at night unless they can see who's calling it. Not a superstition passed down for fun. A rule people actually live by, because for over 200 years, hunters, hikers, campers, and even trained search and rescue teams have reported the same impossible thing happening deep in these hills, and nobody has ever fully explained it. Picture this. You're camping somewhere in the backcountry of West Virginia or eastern Kentucky, miles from the nearest road, and it's just past midnight. The fire's down to embers, and then you hear someone yell for help, using your name, in a voice that sounds exactly like your brother, your wife, your best friend. Every instinct in your body says go. Go now. But if you've heard the stories, you know the one rule that might save your life is the hardest rule there is to follow. Stay where you are. This isn't folklore invented to scare children around a campfire. Park rangers in the Great Smoky Mountains have quietly warned backcountry permit holders about it for decades, even if they won't put it in writing. Search and rescue veterans in Appalachia have a name for the phenomenon they don't like saying out loud on record, because once you say it, people ask questions nobody can answer. They just call it the mimic. Before we get into what people believe is actually out there, it helps to understand the land itself because the Appalachian Mountains aren't like other American wilderness. They are some of the oldest mountains on the planet, older than the Rockies, older than the Himalayas, worn down over hundreds of millions of years into deep hollows, dense fog, and forests so thick that sound behaves strangely inside it. Add to that a region settled by isolated communities for centuries. Families who lived generation after generation without much contact with the outside world. And you get a place where stories didn't just get told. They got tested, passed down, and taken seriously, because the people telling them were the same people surviving out there. This is where Shadowlight Stories comes in, because we've spent months going through old newspaper archives, Forest Service records, and first-hand accounts from people who still live in these hollows, and the pattern that shows up again and again is too consistent to just wave away as coincidence. If this story has already given you a chill, that's exactly the kind of thing we dig into every week here. So if you want more of it, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to tell you next is stranger than how this started, and it involves something that happened to a search and rescue team in 1998 that they still won't talk about on the record. The core of the legend is simple to describe but hard to sit with once you understand it. Something in these mountains can imitate human voices with perfect accuracy. Not a rough approximation, not a garbled echo. A perfect, convincing copy of a voice it has heard before. Usually a loved one, usually calling for help, usually calling your name specifically. Cherokee oral tradition speaks of a spirit called the Raven Mocker, a being that could take the shape and sound of someone trusted in order to draw victims away from safety. Early European settlers who moved into these hollows in the 1700s and 1800s brought their own version of the warning, telling their children never to answer a voice in the woods at night unless they'd already counted every person in the family circle by the fire. What makes this different from a simple echo or your imagination playing tricks is the specificity witnesses describe. Not a vague call for help, the exact voice of someone they knew, using details only that person would know, calling from a direction that seemed to shift every time they tried to locate it. A hiker interviewed in 2016 near the Blue Ridge Parkway described hearing his hiking partner call his name in obvious distress, the kind of voice you can't ignore, except his hiking partner was standing right next to him the entire time, silent, confused, hearing nothing at all. Here's where it gets harder to dismiss. Wildlife biologists have documented that certain animals native to Appalachia, including bobcats and some species of owl, are capable of producing sounds that mimic human screams and even fragments of speech-like patterns. That's real, that's documented, and it explains a lot of the isolated incidents. But it doesn't explain the cases where the voice used a specific name. It doesn't explain the cases where multiple people, hiking separately, on separate nights, months apart, heard the exact same phrase called out from the tree line. And it doesn't explain why so many seasoned outdoorsmen, the kind of people who don't scare easily, describe a feeling they all use almost the same words for. Not fear exactly. Wrongness. Like something was studying them before it spoke. There's a reframe worth sitting with here, because this legend isn't just a scary story about the woods. It's not just about a monster. It's about trust, and how easily trust can be turned into a weapon. The mimic, whatever it actually is, doesn't attack with claws or teeth first. It attacks with love. It uses the voice of the person you'd run toward without thinking twice. The one voice your body reacts to before your brain even catches up. That's the real horror underneath this story. It's not that something out there sounds human, it's that it knows exactly which sound will make you stop being careful. Think about what that means for a second. Every warning system we have as human beings, every instinct that keeps us alive, is built on trusting the people we love. We're wired to run toward a familiar voice in distress. That's not weakness. That's what makes us human. That's what makes families and communities survive generation after generation. And somewhere in these old mountains, according to 200 years of consistent testimony, something figured out how to turn our greatest strength into bait. Now here's the detail almost nobody talks about, and it's the one that changes how you look at this whole legend. In several documented cases, the voice heard in the woods wasn't calling out in panic or pain at all. It was calm, steady, just repeating a name over and over, patient, the way you'd call a dog that wasn't quite ready to come yet. Search and rescue logs from a 2003 incident in the Monongahela National Forest describe a missing hiker's family member reporting that they heard his voice, perfectly clear, saying, "I'm right here," from somewhere in the fog, at a time when the hiker had already been missing for 11 hours and was later found nearly 2 miles in the opposite direction, disoriented, with no memory of hearing anything at all. Whatever called that family member's name that night wasn't in distress, it was waiting. That single detail is what separates this from every other campfire story about monsters in the woods. Most legends are about something chasing you. This one is about something that doesn't need to chase you because it already knows you'll come on your own the moment it finds the right voice to use. So what do you take from a story like this, something you can't fully prove and can't fully dismiss either? Maybe it's this: the wilderness has always tested more than our bodies. It tests the things we trust without question, and that's true whether you're standing in the Appalachian dark or just navigating your own life. Not everything that sounds familiar is safe. Not every voice calling your name deserves an immediate answer. Sometimes the wisest thing a person can do in the woods or anywhere else is pause long enough to ask whether what's calling you is really who you think it is. If you've ever been out in the backcountry and heard something you couldn't explain, a voice, a call, a sound that made the hair on your arms stand up for no clear reason, I want to hear about it, so drop it in the comments below, because these stories deserve to be heard by more than just the people who lived through them, and somewhere out there, someone reading your comment might realize they weren't the only one who heard it too. And if this story stayed with you the way it stayed with everyone who helped research it, share it with someone who loves the outdoors, because the most valuable thing you can hand a person before they walk into those old mountains isn't a map or a flashlight. It's a reason to think twice before they answer a voice calling their name in the dark. Because in these ancient hills, the thing you should fear most was never the sound of something inhuman. It's the sound of something that learned to be exactly what you needed to hear.